Welcome to Module 20 on cryptography. Let's have a look and see what we're going to go over in Module number 20. All right, so Module number 20 is split into 4 major areas. The first objective for learning is cryptography concepts and some cryptographic algorithms. And then we move into cryptography using some applications to help make it easier. And then we're going to look at cryptanalysis and cryptography attacks. And lastly, we'll explain cryptography attacks, talk about some countermeasures. So let's get started. Here in our first learning objective, number 1, we're going to explain some cryptographic concepts and algorithms. So let's have a look. All right, the first thing we're going to look at then is the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. You know, encryption has been around for a while. I've mentioned World War II and Bletchley Park before, but we've had various types of encoding like ACBASH and many different methodologies to hide text within text and so on to protect that confidential data. And right now, our cryptography is crucial in a world that is highly driven by what happens online, giving us confidentiality, integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation like we were talking about at the very beginning of the course. And I mentioned symmetric and asymmetric encryption. So let us say that this little controller that moves my slides, this is a encryption key. So if I wanted to do symmetric encryption, I would actually need only one encryption key. So with symmetric encryption, what I would do is I would take the document that I wanted to send to you, and I would encrypt it with the encryption key, and then I would send it to you. So on its way to you, as it goes through all the shark-infested waters of the internet, nobody would be able to decrypt it. In fact, you wouldn't be able to decrypt it because you don't have the encryption key. I'm not sending this key with the document. I'm just sending the encrypted document. You don't have the key. So now what I need to do is I need to get a copy of this key to you. So symmetric encryption will hint at something deeper. And the thing that's deeper that it hints at is that you need a mechanism to get the key from me to you. So you could take the document that we encrypted, and then you get a copy of the key, and then you can decrypt it. And so that's where we talk about concepts of key exchange. However, for asymmetric encryption, it's a little bit different. I don't just have one key, I have 2 different keys. They are ever so slightly mathematically related, but not so much that you can reverse engineer them. And what we do with asymmetric encryption is I have a message to send to you. And what I'll do is on my email, on my web page, on my LinkedIn site, I'll publish my public key. So when I encrypt my document and send it to you, my public key, all it does is decrypt. Whereas with symmetric encryption, this single key encrypts and decrypts. Asymmetric encryption, one key encrypts, the other decrypts. So I can send you an encrypted document with your encryption key, your public key, and then you can decrypt it with your private key. You can send me an encrypted document with my public key, and I can decrypt it with my private key. And so with private keys, talking about secrets, we want to keep the private keys as hidden as possible. So I think you get that. Next thing we're going to talk about is ciphers. Ciphers, they're algorithms that are used to encrypt and decrypt. There are many different types of ciphers. We have good old classical ciphers, substitution ciphers, transposition ciphers. Maybe when you were in 1st or 2nd or 3rd grade, you may have done a transposition cipher. These call them tramps in the back in the old days. But you get the alphabet, and you put numbers behind the alphabet, and you transpose the alphabet into numbers, and then you send the a little message folded up in a triangular football kind of thing, and you send it across the room to your best friend, and somebody intercepts it, and they open it up, and it's just a bunch of numbers, and they didn't find the message, right? So those are old school, they're crackable. The modern ciphers are based upon either block or stream ciphers, or private public key ciphers. So mainly the ones we use for that are the fastest are going to be block ciphers and stream ciphers. Blocks do chunks of data in a fixed size. Streams do it at the bit level very quickly. And we already talked about private key versus public key, right? So my private key is only going to be used to decrypt my messages. My public key will be used to encrypt messages that are sent to me. So that's what we're talking about with public-private key. All right, look at all these algorithms. There are quite a lot of them. The quintessential archetypal symmetric cipher is DES. And then since DES is hackable, if you want to use DES, use 3DES. We have AES, which I told you before was Rendell, and now it's AES, RC4, 5, 6, Blowfish, 2Fish. IDEA, the international data encryption algorithm. 3Fish, Serpent, Camila. T, the tiny encryption algorithm. It's actually very interesting that this algorithm is used for things like IoT and very small devices when you need something to encrypt, but you don't have a lot of space. And CAS 128 using bent functions and 256, and wow, quite a lot. If you look at whether it's block or stream ciphers, the only three that are stream ciphers are RC4 and Cha-Cha 20 and Salsa 20. Those are only stream cipher ones. Different block sizes and so on. One very interesting thing about all of these is some of them are going to be analyzable by quantum computers. And a lot of them will be analyzable by quantum AI. There's a few more in the asymmetric area, RSA. RSA, great danger from quantum analysis. And this is one that the NSA is replacing. And so if you look up the contest for the replacement of RSA or for quantum safe algorithms, in fact, you can do quantum safe computing Wikipedia and then look at quantum safe article Wikipedia, and that'll back chain you to the contest to save computing. We have DSA, Diffie-Hellman. This is a key exchange algorithm. ECC makes use of random elliptical curves. Have you ever taken Calc 3? Calc 3 is fun. One of the things they have you do is make a random curve, and then given two locations, find the equation of the curve, which is 100% unique. And this is roughly based on that. AlgoMel is another one for encryption and key exchange. Another cryptographic function is hashing. What hashing does is everything digital is just a collection of ones and zeros, and they can have very unique patterns. However, let's say that I want to go download Parrot Security Linux, and it's about 3-point-something gigabytes of data, depending on which type of download that you do. So 3.7 gigabytes, that's 3.7 billion bytes. And so we have these 8-bit bytes of ones and zeros, billions and billions of them. And we run a hashing algorithm. It produces a unique hash with upper and lowercase numbers and letters and so on. Upper and lowercase letters. I've never met an upper or lowercase number. If you find one, let me know. But you know what I mean, these mixes of characters. And what it does is for that unique pattern, you get a unique hash like this right here. There's those upper and lowercase numbers. They look kind of strangely like letters to me. But either way, we also have an idea of a hash collision where there are two messages can have the same hash, right? So if any given bit of the function is changed, then every output has a 50% chance of changing. So in other words, I change one bit, flip one bit, and the entire hash value changes. You can see this. We'll demonstrate this in the lab. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Then we have multiple functions for hashing. Some of the older ones, MD2, MD4, MD5, quite hackable. And you see that is legacy. If you look down here, SHA-1 is very much similar to MD5, also very hackable. So you really want to get into SHA-2, SHA-3, things like RIPE-MD, et cetera, that are much less hackable. When I say hackable, I mean they're not as prone to hash collisions. So you can download and install locally on your machine hash calculators, or you can go online and do find hash calculators. And what'll happen is you put in the binary pattern and it produces a hash from it. So that binary pattern could be that huge download of Parrot Security Linux. It could be an MP3. It could be a picture. It could be a message. And we can provide a hash for that message. In fact, if you go to download a lot of those big files, sometimes they'll have the hash of that file for you so that you can compare the hash at the other end. There are also multi-layer hashing calculators. These multi-layer hashing calculators are nested hashing, recursive hashing. They hash within a hash. CyberChef, I said chess. CyberChef is one of them. It's actually pretty cool because it allows you to use multiple algorithms and embedded hashing. There's also hardware-based encryption. If you get a motherboard for a PC, a Mac, that motherboard will have a chip on it for TPM, which is a trusted platform module, to help with motherboard-based on-chip hardware processing for cryptographic operations. Then we have HSM, hardware security modules. I remember when I was doing a lot of cloud work, one of the things that we did quite a lot is for helping with encryption, we use cloud HSMs. And when I first started using those, I thought maybe they were emulated or simulated. But if you go to cloud providers, they actually have data centers with row upon row, rack upon rack of actual physical HSMs that you use in the cloud provider. You can get an HSM. It could be everything from something that looks kind of like a dongle to a card that you plug into a PCIe slot. You can get a definite dongle for USB encryption. You plug it in to USB, and it helps with the onboard encryption. And you can do whole disk encryption. We'll talk about some tools for that. One area that I really have become extremely interested in is quantum cryptography. If you go to IBM Quantum Computing, you can create a free account. And I've done this. They'll walk you through submitting your first quantum workload. It's pretty exciting. IBM also has a very exciting quantum roadmap. And when IBM published their quantum roadmap, it blew me away how quickly they wanted to get to extremely large number of qubits. But you know what blew me away even more? Their competitors. Because there are a lot of competitors to IBM's quantum initiative, and they're pushing the envelope. Quantum computing is, right now, I just read a report today, I think this morning. This morning. And what it talked about was the fact that 50% of quantum researchers believe that quantum computing is going faster than they thought it would. And it's one of those technologies that is on an asymptotic curve. It's going very quickly, and it's going to be surprising when we have capabilities that we thought we didn't even have just a few weeks ago. And one of those is quantum cryptography. It's based upon QKD, which is quantum key distribution. And what we're talking about with quantum computing is quanta. Quanta. What a quanta is, it's a subatomic measurement particle that's based upon quantum physics principles. For instance, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, quantum tunneling, and items like that. So in this case, it's a sequence of photons, and we have photon spin. And spin in quantum terms is a lot different than spin that you would imagine if you were spinning a basketball or twirling around. It's it's weirder, okay? Study quantum spin, you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyway, look at that spin trait traveling from one end to another. And one of the problems with the, I guess it's not a problem, but a feature of quanta is that the state, they don't actually resolve into their current quantum state until they are observed. It's the observation principle. So they'll keep changing their shapes and their course, flying through filters, or horizontal, vertical, and various filters. And so attackers, if you eavesdrop on it, it'll collapse a quantum state. And all of a sudden, there's no more communication. So you know right away that someone's trying to eavesdrop. And that's because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. When you observe that quantum state, the state collapses. And so it makes it virtually impossible by any means that we understand to crack quantum cryptography. Tools that we can use. Well, the first tool you need is go out to eBay and buy yourself a used million qubit quantum computer. That's the best tool out there. No, actually, quantum computers, have you seen how those little guys are? They're so huge. They require cooling. I don't expect quantum computers to be very portable for another 20 years in my estimation. But we have tools for cryptography. Hey, can we go there first? I think we can go there first. So this is a BC text encoder, and you can use it to encode text messages. We have CryptoForge and XCrypt and Microsoft cryptography tools and many others out there. There's a lot of cryptography tools that are available. Here in objective number 2. See, there's some French there. I've done some Spanish. So in objective 2, what we're going to be doing is looking at some of the applications of cryptography. Hey, let's have a look. The PKI, the public key infrastructure. There are many ways to build a PKI. My first experience with PKI was a long time ago, and that is building PKIs using Microsoft Certificate Server. So what you do is you add in that role to a Microsoft server, make it into a certificate server, and then you begin building out a certificate hierarchy. And then you use things like at the very top, you can barely see DigiCert, Komodo, whatever, to register certificates. Then you can use those root certificates to distribute them for various purposes. So yeah, PKIs have been around for a while. So let's talk about how it works. So let me go grab my pen here. And the first thing that we see with the PKI is, I'm going to change the color. Let's do some purple. I think that would be good. So this user right chair, what the user is going to do is, let's say we're using certificate services. We'll kind of make this into Microsoft certificate services. Maybe you're on a local area network and you have certificate services running. So what will happen is this user would log into Active Directory. And so when they apply for a certificate, what this registration authority, whose responsibility it is, you can see to act as a verifier. So it'll say, hey, yo, CA. And no, this is not a California. It's a certificate authority. The certificate authority will have everybody that's allowed to get certificates. And so it'll say, yep, this dude, we'll call his name Bob. There we go. So yes, Bob has an account and he's authorized to have a certificate. So then a certificate will be issued by the CA to Mr. Bob there. All right, so now Bob has a public and a private key, right? Because it's a public key infrastructure. Now Bob might want to use a resource on the network. So he's going to use this resource. Let's call it app. And so Bob contacts app, and app says, yo, Bob, do you have a valid certificate? And so what it does is it checks with the validation authority. The validation authority has these CRL on it. That's a certificate revocation list. And that gets updated from the CA periodically. And so what it does is checks that CRL and other factors to see if it's a valid certificate, and slay, it's a good certificate. So app says, yo, Bob, you're good to go. And of course it's texting it. So it says GTG. It's all there. So that's how it all works. So what you want to keep your eyes on is making sure you understand each of these components. And the first and most important one is the certificate management system. It generates and distributes and stores and verifies everything. But also keep in mind that this certificate authority is the one that issues everything and verifies, right? So we have different roles. Another thing too, that in this validation authority that we see over here, this validation authority, we see that what it did is it looked at one of the things that we don't see on this list, which is a CRL, or a certificate revocation list. So we see revoked certificates on that list. And let me make sure that all my stuff is erased from this board. Yeah, it's all erased. So I'm GTG. Good to go. Okay, so when we're talking about CAs, certificate authorities, there is a difference between signed and self-signed certificates. A self-signed certificate is like, for instance, with Microsoft Certificate Server, what I do is I issue my own certificate for my own network, for my own purposes. And if I issue that, let's say I issue that to a web server like IIS, and then IIS is able to use HTTPS. But when one of my computers checks in with that web app, I'll get a certificate error because self-signed certificates aren't trusted. What if I am an evil hacker, dude? And I set that up to lure people in. We don't know who I am. I just created that out of whole cloth. I just made it up. So nobody knows anything. But if I use a signed certificate from a certificate authority, so if we look over here, where does it give me my authorities? We saw them on the other slide. So let's go back over there, like Komodo, DigiCert, or GoDaddy, right? So now it looks at a higher level authority and pulls that information out. And so when I make that HTTPS, it works a lot better. Now, why would a certificate authority, why do I want to pay money to DigiCert or GoDaddy? Why do I want to pay them money when I can get an absolutely free self-signed certificate? Now, I could go through a few loops to make it a little bit better for my organization inside to work easier. It's just very, very difficult to use a self-signed certificate outside of a local network. That's one reason. The other reason is because what that a certificate authority will do, like DigiCert, is they will actually do a little bit of work to prove you are a real entity, right? So they'll check on your organization, check on who you are before issuing you the certificate. So there's a little bit more trust there that you are real. Another construct in cryptography is a digital signature. The purpose of the digital signature is to verify that the data sent from Ellis has not changed by the time it reaches Bob. That's what we're doing with digital signature. It uses asymmetric cryptography, and it does a digital sign. The digital signature may be further protected by encrypting the signed email. So we might actually encrypt the email. The main purpose, though, is to make sure the data isn't corrupted in flight. So basically, how it runs is we have our confidential information, the hash value, the sender, that's Alice over here. In fact, let's go ahead and make these out. So we have Alice over here and Bob over here. And so Alice is the sender. She signs the hash code using, he signs the hash code using his private key. So that's like Alice Cooper, I guess we're saying, Alice Cooper, right? And so with his private key, and then we encrypt the message using a one-time symmetric key. And then we encrypt the symmetric key using the recipients. Who's the recipient? That's Bob, right? So Bob's public key is made up. That's how the seal is made. And then we're able to deliver it. And then what's going to happen is we verify it, unlock it, decrypt it using the his private key. And then we are able to open and accept the message. So it's a multi-step. One of the things to keep in mind, though, is this part right here. Where does a digital signing come from? A hash code using the sender's private key. So signs using that private key. And then if you look at the sealing, it's using the recipient's public key. Those are the two most important things to remember in this slide. And then it's just reversed on the other side. Another area that is actually very fascinating is SSL, the secure socket layer. We find that is very useful for encrypting transactions. It uses RSA, the public key encryption, to encrypt data and send it over connections. Remember, RSA is the one that is used all over the internet for a multitude, millions of transactions daily. And it's one that is potentially vulnerable to cryptanalysis through quantum computers. So anyway, we have a little hello message that has version information and so on. And then we have a little reply that has encryption algorithms that we can use. And then we negotiate encryption, verify the digital certificate, run the key exchange, and eventually we calculate a hash value for the exchange message. We compare it to the hash value received. Eventually we end up with the negotiated protocols and hash values, etc., and we have a secure connection. Take your time and go through that. We don't go through handshakes and zoom in detail usually. There's also a TLS handshake with a client hello, certificate exchange, server hello done, client certificate exchange. We verify some of the cryptography, and then we have a server finished message. Handshake protocol finishes. We start sending encrypted data. One of the coolest tools for doing this is OpenSSL. They're running an OpenSSL ENC ciphers here, and it gives you all the different ciphers that are available. These are just some of them. This is just the A section that can be used. So SSL v2 and 3 and TLS v1 are all available under OpenSSL. Another cryptographic algorithm that's really good, actually it's pretty good, it's pretty good privacy. So it's used for encryption, decryption, authentication, cryptographic privacy, data, digital signing, emails, messages, etc. And one of these things that you want to keep in mind is, since it uses public key cryptography and it combines the best of those conventional with public key cryptography using both, it's a hybrid crypto system. Now, PGP, when it first came out, everybody used it. And you'd see people publishing their PGP public key on everything, like I was kind of mentioning before. And then people would be able to send and receive, and specifically emails is what it was used on quite a lot. And then PGP got sold, bought, somehow became unavailable. And pretty soon new versions like GNU Privacy Guard and so on came up. But they all are hybrid crypto systems. And if you look at the way it's done, one of the things I want to ask students who are studying for the tests when you're looking at this is, whose key is it? Right? So what we have is the data. We encrypt the data using a random key. After generating that random key, it's encrypted using the receiver's what? The receiver's public key. So the receiver, here's Bob, here's Ellis. So that is that person's public key. So we take the data, the encrypted key, we encrypt the message, and then we send that data back And what's going to happen is we're going to decrypt using the receivers. That is good old Bob again, private key. And eventually we decrypt the message and we're good to go. So that's what we're talking about with GPG. I'm sorry, that's PGP. GPG is very similar. If you look at the receivers, public key, again, that's Bob over here, is used to encrypt. Very similar. Also, GPG supports S-MIME and SSH, and it too is hybrid, right? So it uses both symmetric key and asymmetric key cryptography. So it's a hybrid crypto system also. What? Yeah, WOT, Web of Trust. It's a trust model that makes use of PGP Open, PGP GNU, Privacy Guard, and everybody trusts everyone else because they put together a chain of certificate authorities where they sign for each other, they mutually authenticate each other, and so everybody that's in this ring has trust because this one here, Ellen, directly trusts Bob, who directly trusts Henry, and because of all these trusts, mathematically, these indirect trusts are absolutely true. And so you have this web of trust that's put together. It's a little ring that we use to trust everybody. All right, so for encryption, you can S-MIME your email. So this is just showing you how to do it in the Trust Center for Microsoft. It's showing you how to get to the settings and set it so that your Outlook send clear text signed messages when signing messages. So you can set up your encryption settings here. It takes you to a secondary box where you set it up. There are other encryption tools. RMail is actually pretty cool. Gives proof, email encryption, electronic signatures, a large file transfer, envelope, WebRoot, and others do similar stuff. Next, we go to disk encryption. So you remember I was telling you, I don't know if you remember, you're in an airport, you realize you've been watching that movie too long, and you pack your bags real quick because you need to get to the other side of the airport because your flight changed gates and you're late now, and you leave, and when you're finally relaxed and finally made it on this plane, you realize that you left your laptop at the Dunkin' Donuts where you were getting coffee. So fortunately for you, you're using whole disk encryption, which gives you privacy, which is confidentiality, encryption, and whole overall protection for that disk drive, and even for flash drives and external hard drives, and even for your backup. So disk encryption is pretty cool. There are lots of disk encryption tools. I like this one, VeraCrypt. It's free. It's open source, on-the-fly encryption. I've used it quite a lot of times. It's really nice. Rojos is great. FileVault, if you're on your Mac, is fantastic. So FileVault is great for encrypting on there. We have BitLocker, which is built into Microsoft Windows computers, Symantec, Safeguard, and many other very cool disk encryption tools. Then we have the idea of the blockchain. What technologies do you think are on the blockchain? I bet you the technology that comes to mind first is, that's right, Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is one of the most recognizable blockchain technologies. But if you were to go to your little LLM, so whatever your LLM of choice is, and you say, hey, LLM, give me the top 20 blockchain-based technologies, you'd be surprised what you find, from file systems to applications to currency, right? There's quite a lot with the blockchain. So what I would like to do is take a little bit of time and talk about how the blockchain works. So let's have a look at where we are. So the blockchain, as you see right here, is a DLT. And if you're really hungry, you'll probably be thinking it's a BLT, but that's a little bit of a different construct. So it's a DLT, a distributed ledger technology. So what it does is it records transactions across all kinds of computers in a way that ensures that you have three major areas, and that's going to be security, immutability, and transparency is what we're looking for. And so each of these transactions, I'm going to switch to a pointer here. Let me see if I can find my pointer. So each of these transactions is going to be put onto the ledger, onto the chain. We have multiple transactions. You have multiple blocks that are created. And it starts, if you look over here on the far left side, with a transaction request. So if you're in a blockchain network, you initiate this transaction. It could be an asset transfer. It could be a data exchange or some type of operation. So if you're running Bitcoin, it's assets transfer. If you're running a file system, it's a data exchange. So anyway, what's going to happen is you're going to create a block. So the transaction request is going to be transmitted over the network, where a new block is created. It's going to hold the details of the transaction. And then this block that's created is going to be transmitted to all participants, all nodes for validation. And then in the validation phase, what's going to happen is the members or nodes that are participating in this chain in the network, they're going to validate the transaction by consensus. Different blockchains are going to be using different types of consensus mechanisms. And I don't think it actually displays any of the mechanisms right here, but they could be POW, which is proof of work, or POS, which is proof of stake. Anyway, they're going to make sure that it's legal transaction. And then the next thing that's going to happen is in step 4 here, we're going to add it to the blockchain. So once it's validated, the block is added, and it's going to be in chronological order, and it's permanent. Once a block is added, it never goes away. And then lastly, but not leastly, in fact, very importantly, the ledger is updated. And so we have quite a lot of transaction capability. Privacy is guaranteed, and transparency is guaranteed. If you look at the types of blockchain, you have public and private, federated and hybrid blockchains, which is pretty cool. And one of the areas that is extremely important, and it comes up when we're talking about the blockchain, we're talking about the explosion in data centers. We are about to run into an energy, I wouldn't call it a crisis, but energy concerns, especially in the United States and Western Europe and China also. And the reason why is because it takes a lot of energy to do all this. For anybody who's done Bitcoin mining, have you done Bitcoin mining? Especially in the early days, and you get a Bitcoin rig with a whole bunch of graphics cards, and you would not need to pay for heat in the winter because that thing would radiate heat into the whole house as it churned away on that blockchain. Well, imagine data centers worth of that. So we have blockchains, the blockchain and various different blockchain models that just take a lot of compute and generate a lot of heat, and therefore take a lot of energy. And then as we bring new data centers online, I think that eventually as multi-trillion-dollar corporations bring data centers online that have technologies like this and technologies to help with LLMs and so on, that they're going to bring a data center and a power center too, like maybe a small nuclear reactor or something like that. Or maybe make cooperative agreements with municipalities to bring in new power, because that is a substantial risk in growth of both the blockchain and data centers. If you want more information about this, just do a little research on data centers and energy, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Welcome to this section. In this section, objective number 3, we're going to be looking at cryptanalysis. And we're going to see with cryptanalysis, there are many different methods that we can use to analyze and crack cryptography. In this first section, though, I want to do a little bit of a deep dive. We'll call it a shallow dive because we're not going to spend too much time in it, but at the different cryptanalysis methods. Let's have a look. So what we see here is there are 4 cryptanalysis methods. Let's have a look at it. So first of all, on the far upper left side, and I'm going to grab a nice little pointer here, laser pointer. In the far left-hand corner, we have linear cryptanalysis. And then we have differential, integral, and quantum cryptanalysis. Each one of these is used for a different purpose. Let's start with linear cryptanalysis. It's a technique. It's mainly used against block ciphers, as you can see right over here, block ciphers. And if you have a question on this in the exam, that's the main thing you want to know, is linear cryptanalysis used for block ciphers. So what it does is it involves finding a linear equation that's going to approximate the behavior of the encryption algorithm. So what you do is you analyze a huge amount of pairs, known pairs, plain text, and their ciphertext. So it's a pair of plain text and ciphertext. And then you can deduce information about the secret key. For example, if you're dealing with a 56-bit DES key, DES, that you could reduce the number of attempts that you would need to find the key, especially when you compare it against a brute force attack. Mathematically, this is the equation for linear cryptanalysis. And one of the very interesting things, like I say, I'm a stickler for math. I really love math. One of the things that you see here and by the way, what we're looking at here is it involves a really big XOR. That's the symbol for XOR. And there's a truth table to each one of these types of symbols. But either way, XOR and modular arithmetic and linear algebra are highly involved with each one of these things. And so you get a little bit of the equation for linear cryptanalysis. So let's have a look next at, let's try differential cryptanalysis. And let me back up on the equation and just talk about it first. And so what we do with that is we want to break symmetric key encryption schemes with it. So you can see here, it's used for a symmetric key algorithm. So over here, linear is block and differential is symmetric key schemes, where you have the same key that you use to encrypt and decrypt. And so what we do with this is we study the differences in input, which is going to be the plain text, that can cause some changes in output, which is going to be the ciphertext. So originally, it required us to have the ability to choose specific plain text to analyze the differences. But over time, it's changed. We evolved it to work even with known plain text and ciphertext, so making it pretty versatile for cryptanalysis. And you'll see here, for this one, we also have a nice little equation for a differential cryptanalysis, or that delta P. And with this one, what we're looking at is, again, differences in the way that these two blocks work. The next one we look at then is integral cryptanalysis. And when we look at integral cryptanalysis, we're targeting block ciphers that use SPNs. SPM is a substitution permutation network. So it's an advanced form of differential cryptanalysis. So when you look at linear cryptanalysis, really, it's an advanced form of differential cryptanalysis. And it focuses on keeping part of the input data fixed while varying other parts to observe how the cipher reacts. So it's really useful against algorithms that use these SPN, substitution permutation structures. And so you can examine all possible configurations of certain bits that you want to uncover weaknesses in encryption. And this is the algorithm that we're using, which is a XOR from I equals 1 to 16 of C sub I, right? So if you do linear algebra, you recognize this. It's basically summing over those XORs. All right, the next thing we look at is quantum cryptanalysis. Oh, before we do the equation, there we go. So let's just talk about it before we run the equation there. So it's a process of using quantum computers to break cryptographic systems, and they have great potential to solve a lot of mathematical problems like that are a lot faster and do it a lot faster than classical computers. Sometimes it almost seems infinitely faster. It's pretty amazing. So they are actually right now a significant threat to cryptographic standards, which is why Kyber's Crystal and many other NIST, I think earlier I said NSA, it's the NIST, we've developed methods to create quantum safe encryption. And that's why, because quantum computers are so powerful. So to carry out this type of cryptographic analysis, as an attacker, you need access to the encrypted data and some type of quantum resource that makes use of qubits, like that IBM quantum computation, like I was talking about before, that uses qubits, quantum gates, and quantum circuits. And this can really do quite a lot for breaking networks. So that is quantum cryptanalysis. And for this one, this is called Grover's algorithm. And so this is Grover's algorithm. There are many quantum algorithms. This is big O, the square root of n. And there are many like it. It looks very simple. It's very interesting how some of these very simple looking equations can do so much, like Shor's algorithm and many others that look simple, but in the end, they're not that simple, and they result in quite a lot of capabilities. And that's the same with the Grover's algorithm. All right, so let's go away from a little bit of a deep dive here and talk about cryptography attacks. And there are many of them, and we'll just do an overview here. We have ciphertext only, and so you have access to the ciphertext, and what you're trying to do is recover the encryption key. Adaptive chosen plain text, and you have a series of interactive queries. We saw that with some of the previous slide when we talked about some of those analytical structures and how we do that. So we choose subsequent plain text based upon that information. Chosen plain text, as the attacker, you define your own. You choose it. That's why we have the word chosen there. And feed it into the cipher, analyze it, see what we get out of it. And then related key, you get ciphertext encrypted under two different keys. And as the attacker, you might be able to get the plain text and the matching ciphertext. That's what we were looking for. And then a dictionary attack, we've seen that before, where we have a dictionary of plain text. It's going to be passwords or parts of passwords or whatever, and that you run against that scheme until you break it. Known plain text. So you actually have some knowledge of part of the text, and using that, the key used to generate the ciphertext is deduced to decipher the message. And so this is actually a very interesting one because we can use different statistical analysis methods to pull this out, frequency analysis and so on. And that's why it's so important. You know, in government structures, we have secret and top secret, and we have encrypted communications and so on. There was a really interesting book called Cryptonomicon, and Cryptonomicon was a modern day book, plus it was a World War II book. So it's worth a read. Modern day, though, was in the late 90s. And what they talked about, and this actually happened sometimes, is they're making these encryption schemes for OTPs, and there was somebody who would turn a cage that had a huge number of colored and numbered balls. And what she did is she reached in, grabbed one of the balls, and this would be a part of one of the seeds for the keys they created to create their encrypted text. Then eventually the Germans broke the code. And in their backchain analysis, they realized that the assistant who was pulling out the colored balls had a liking, and she didn't do it on purpose, but she had a liking for a specific color. And they were able to analyze that frequency and use a known plaintext attack against the OTPs. If you can find a snippet, a small part of a message, and then look for the frequency of whatever's in that message in the encryption algorithm, you might be able to pull out the information. So that one has been used. All of these have been used quite a lot. I wish we had time to give examples of all of them. Chosen ciphertext. So the attacker gets a plaintext corresponding to an arbitrary set of ciphertext that they choose, right? So they're choosing not the message, but the ciphertext. A rope or hose attack. You don't have any information about the message or about the encryption, but you have the guy who knows. And so you extract it out of him with torture or something like that. So we see that used in warfare all the time. And then chosen key attacks. So the attacker breaks it into n-bit key ciphers into 2 to the n over 2 operations. And so what we're doing is we're using a mathematical operation to break up the calculation and make it a little bit easier computationally. Then we have timing attacks. So what we're doing here is we're repeatedly measuring the exact execution times over and over again. And I was saying that we have modular mathematics that are used quite a lot in cryptanalysis. And in this case, we're using modular exponentiation operations for a timing attack. And then we go to MITM, which we've seen before with other types of attacks against everything from network to the cloud. And we do this with public key crypto systems where the key exchange is required before communication. And so we can do the MITM and maybe get in the middle of that key exchange. Also, we have code breaking. So in this case, I want to crack the code, and we are trying to measure the strength of the encryption algorithm and then maybe even crack that code. And as we go through all this, just keep in mind that ever since Bletchley Park and World War II, all of this is computationally intensive, especially brute force, where we're trying every single combination. In just a little while, we'll look at a table that explains how computationally difficult that is. Then frequency analysis. So let me give you a supposition. Suppose that somebody wrote plain text. So maybe it's a letter that's being sent to somebody else. The plain text has been encrypted, and I'm looking at like for instance, occurrences of all these letters, and I find that by frequency analysis, one of these occurs the most in the document. What letter would that be? You're right, it is E. The letter E is used the most in English. And so what I could do then is use that frequency analysis to fill in all the E's. Can I buy an E? And then what we'll do is go to the next most used letter and the next, etc. And eventually we could be able to put the whole thing together and through frequency analysis. Now, it's not just letters, but there are other ways to use frequency analysis. And then, of course, trickery and deceit. When we talk about social engineering, that's what we're doing. We're tricking them into giving us the information. And so you can get somebody to say, we did not get the rest of that transmission. Please repeat. and then they repeat it, but it was to the attacker, not to the originator or the person who was supposed to get the conversation. OTPs, I've been talking about this. These are they make use of non-repeating groups of letters or numeric keys, which are chosen randomly. So again, created to be resistant to analysis. But depending on the algorithm and depending on how it's created, even OTPs can be cracked. So when I was talking about brute force attacks, I always joke about the fact that in order for you to crack a large password, that you'll have to exhaust a universe or two in terms of the amount of time that would take. And this is just an example here looking at power and cost. And so I just like zoom in on the last one here. So I have a 16, this is only 16 characters. I routinely use 20 character passphrases, but 10 to the 18 years to do that. If you go to 5 characters, this is another reason why you need to always emphasize that people need to create long passphrases, because even at its most, it's going to be only 1.4 minutes. So 10 to 20, 10 to 19, 10 to 18 for 16 characters. Again, it's about password entropy. So there are tools that you can use for brute force. One tool that we use for encryption quite a lot is called Veracrypt. And you can brute force Veracrypt encryption. And so what you do is use the DD command. This is the DD command is very interesting. The history of Linux has quite a lot of very interesting items in it. And one story is that DD actually stands for carbon copy. But what happened is CC was already reserved, so they just changed it to DD. So yeah, so DD is carbon copy. Although with Linux, as with all things, there are disputes about that story. But we can use DD to extract the hashes from an encrypted container using Hashcat or John the Ripper to actually run the brute force attack. And so they're just showing you some of the steps where you run the command to extract the first 512 bytes of the hash. We're running DD to that specific path, and then we are going to then run Hashcat through there and try to extract those hashes. So it's doable. Again, it takes some compute power to do it, but sometimes you can actually go grab that information. There's another type of attack called meet in the middle. And so what you do is you encrypt on one end and decrypt on the other end, and then you get intermediate ciphertext. And you might be able to use this meet in the middle attack to forge messages that use different encryption schemes. There's also the idea that I've been talking about throughout the class of a side channel attack. So we are looking at environmental factors. We're using these factors to gain information. I was telling you about maybe looking at heat bloom and vibration information to try to discern what some of the cryptographic environment was. And so these are side channel attacks. Another one that we see has been around for a while is a hash collision attack. When I first started with Cisco, they were just changing their encryption scheme that they were using when you locked down the configuration file in their switches and routers. What they were doing is they were encrypting it, and put that in quotes because it's not encryption, with an MD5 hash. And then all you have to do was crack the MD5 hash, and you have the entire encryption. And they finally switched that over to a better scheme, which makes it harder to crack. But that's a hash collision. MD5, SHA-1 are prone to hash collisions. What is it? You find 2 different input messages that result in the same hash. So 2 messages, same hash. And so you can do cryptanalysis on it, especially SHA-1 and MD5. If you want, open up a tab in one of your browsers and do MD5 crack or MD5 hash cracker or something like that, and you'll find that very easy to do. So you're able to forge digital signatures, etc., if you can do hash collision attacks. The duck attack, D-U-H-K. I mentioned this before, duck. No, I'm not asking you to lower your head so you won't hit something. I remember when I was, I must have been about 7 or 8 years old, and I was riding my bike with my brother down the sidewalk, and I realized there was a tree that was really low, and I yelled, duck, and he said, I'm not he thought I was calling him a duck. He said, I'm not a duck, and he got hit by the tree. Yes, family, brothers, it's really fun, but in this case, this type of duck is don't use hard-coded keys. Why? Because you can take all the time that you want to crack a hard-coded key. So the main attack that this affects is hardware or software using the ANSI X9.31 RNG, the random number generator. Also PRNGs, pseudo-random number generators. You'll see this used in DES, cracking a DES. And either way, what we want to do is make sure we don't use hard-coded keys. Next thing we have is a drown attack. So a drown attack is a weakness in a protocol. It takes advantage of that protocol weakness. So if you are looking at your logs, and in your logs, you see that there are a huge number of SSL v2 probes. And you're like, wait a minute, we're not running SSL v2. We're running SSL v3 TLS, right? That's what we're running. What they're trying to do is they're going to try to decrypt your TLS connection by launching a huge number of SSL v2 probes using the same private key. So it is a part of, but not the entire, MITM attack, breaking those encryption keys so they can go grab the data that's in that encrypted communications. So that is the drown attack. Next, we look at the rainbow table attack. And so rainbow table attack is a one that we've already talked about a little bit. We've been able to use a little bit of that, but what we do is we use a rainbow table. And so we have cryptographic hash functions that are put together. So for instance, you might have a dictionary of tens of thousands of hashed resources, and you have that pre-computed hash table with those word lists, and then you take the hash that you have, run it against that very quickly, or you can potentially find that hashed resource and open it up and log into it and find that password. In fact, I use these quite a lot. They're pretty good. Rainbow Crack and many other tools are very good with that. Okay, so I made this slide, so you won't find it in your resources. As you can tell, I went all large language model on you. Maybe by the time you're taking this class, we'll be able to get better. But this actually is not bad. I think this is pretty snazzy. But what we're going to be talking about is blockchain attacks. So with blockchain attacks, we have several different attacks. In fact, if you look at the slide, some of them are named there, like the 51% attack. It's supposed to be Eclipse. It's not quite spelled right. It's doing better, but not perfect. So what we're going to do is do a mini dive into the different types of blockchain attacks. Let's do it. So with blockchain attacks, the first one that we're going to look at is right here. It's called the 51% attack. So what this happens, you have a single attacker, sometimes a group of attackers. They gain control of more than half. Let me grab my pointer here. More than half of the computing power, or maybe sometimes they'll like stick an authority in the blockchain network. So when they do that, the way they gain control, if you look over here, number one, right? So what they do is they get more than 50% of the network's total computation power, depending on hash rate or staking power. And this majority control will allow them to have more influence, a lot of influence over the network. So that's what we're doing. And so we have this isolating mining power. That mining is very important. They separate out their mining power from the blockchain network and create a private version of the blockchain. And this private chain is not immediately visible to the rest of the network. And so that is the problem. And one of the biggest features of the blockchain is that transparency. So that they're going to isolate that mining power. They have that private chain right there. And then they're going to, well, they have this isolated chain right down here. They're going to build the private chain. They're going to continue to add new blocks to the private chain. Since they control the majority of the network's computational power, they'll mine blocks faster than the public chain. And then what they're going to do is reconnect back to the public network. And so after creating a longer chain privately, then they reconnect their private chain to the network. And because the blockchain protocol typically will accept the longest chain as the valid one, the public network now recognizes this dude, the attacker, their private chain as the true blockchain. And then guess what they're going to do? Right down here, you see they're going to get rid of it. They're going to discard the public chain because it's shorter. It's discarded, and the attacker's chain becomes the accepted version of the blockchain. With its power now, the attacker can do a transaction reversing, double spend coins, disrupt the network. So it allows them to manipulate the blockchain for their own malicious purposes. So that is the 51% attack. And like I was mentioning earlier, these attacks are quite computationally intensive. The next one we look at is the Finney attack. So the Finney attack, if we look at this one, this is another type of blockchain attack that exploits a time delay when a transaction is broadcast to the network and when it's confirmed and added to the blockchain. So the attacker is going to use this delay to essentially double spend the same cryptocurrency. And so they'll get buy stuff, get goods and services and so on without actually losing any coins. So how does it work? We start here with the pre-mining block. And so the attacker is going to first mine a block that will include a transaction where they spend coins. So they're actually going to spend some of their currency. The block hasn't yet made it to the network yet. It's not been broadcast to the network. So the next thing that's going to happen, we see this downward path down here, is we're going to initiate the transaction. So the attacker will do a separate transaction to a merchant who's actually going to end up being the victim. So this is the merchant that we're looking for. And then maybe they're paying for goods or services with the same coins used in the pre-mined block. So what's going to happen now is step number 3. It's just a Bitcoin or a Dogecoin or an Ethereum transaction. It's normal. And so they're going to accept that transaction, deliver the goods or services to the attacker, and it seems completely legitimate. So what the attacker is going to do now is they're going to broadcast this malicious block. And so after receiving that service, they're going to broadcast the pre-mined block to the blockchain network. And so it's going to have the transaction where the attacker spent the same coins to themselves, and it conflicts with the transaction of that vendor, this victim. So what's going to happen next? Step number 5, I think, is where we are, right over here. So the network validates it. And so the network's going to receive the pre-mined block, and because it was mined first, it's considered valid, and then it confirms the block and adds it to the chain. And so what's going to happen over here with this green check in step number 6, since the block that contained the transaction to that vendor, that victim, is now invalid. And the coins have already been spent in the pre-mined block. And so the network's going to reject the transaction. And as a result, they end up keeping both the coins and the goods or services that they found. So that's a Finney attack. And so you can spend the same coins twice with the Finney attack. The next attack we're going to look at is an Eclipse attack on the blockchain. So yet another blockchain attack. And so what we're going to look at with the Eclipse attack, it's a type of blockchain attack where the attacker isolates a target node, and they surround it with malicious nodes, and they will effectively control the information that the target node receives. So how is this going to happen? Number 1, we are going over here, are going to fill the peer table with malicious nodes, right? So we're going to fill them with the target's node, a peer table. That target node, that peer table is a list of other nodes that the target can connect to. This is going to be like their IP address and of the malicious node that's controlled by the attacker. So over here we have the DDoS attack, and that's where the attacker is going to launch a distributed denial of service attack on the target node, and they're going to cause it to disconnect from the network and forcing that target node to restart and then look for new connections. All right, seeking connections. And over here in step number 3, it disconnects from the legitimate nodes. So upon restarting here, the target node is going to attempt to reconnect to the blockchain network. But since its peer table is filled with IP addresses of malicious nodes, it disconnects from the legitimate nodes and instead connects only to the attacker's nodes. And over here in step number 4, we reconnect the malicious nodes. And so the target node is now isolated from the rest of the network. It is effectively surrounded by malicious nodes. And then those nodes control all communication with the target node, making sure that only the target is going to get it's only going to get manipulated data. So then we go on to step number 5 down here. And so now the target node is under the control of the attacker. So they can do whatever they want, manipulate it for various malicious purposes. So maybe they might disrupt transactions. Maybe they might split network mining. Maybe they might do double spending, or maybe they might do other things to prevent that node from seeing the actual state of the network. So what we're doing with the Eclipse attack is it's like the moon is going over that node. We're using that node, isolating it, and then surrounding it with malicious nodes and running various attacks with that. The next one we have is a race attack. So let's have a look at the blockchain race attack. So the race attack is another type of double spending attack on the blockchain network. What it does is it's another delay exploitation between when a transaction is first broadcast and when it's confirmed by the network. And how it works, we start number one, we're going to create two transactions. So as an attacker, you create two transactions. Here we have transaction A, and down here we have transaction B. And so these two transactions are going to be using the same coins. The first transaction, A, is actually going to be sent to the victim. The second transaction, B, is sent to another address that is controlled by the attacker. So now what we're going to do in step number 2 is broadcast the first transaction. So transaction A, we're going to broadcast it as quickly as possible to the victim and the network. So the victim sees the transaction, assumes it's legitimate, and then maybe the attacker will get goods or services from that victim. And then number 3, down here, we're broadcasting the second transaction. So immediately, right after broadcasting A, the attacker quickly broadcasts the B transaction to the blockchain network, and it's intended to be confirmed by the network instead of transaction A. So here on step number 4, what we're doing is exploiting that network latency. So really the success of this attack relies on the ability of the attacker to broadcast transaction B quickly enough that it gets confirmed by the network before transaction A, taking advantage of the latency. And so then lastly, what we see in step number 5 is there's an invalidation of the victim's transaction. So if B is confirmed first, the blockchain will recognize it as a valid transaction. As a result, A, which was intended for the victim, that one gets invalidated. And so their transaction is effectively reversed, and the attacker, boom, retains the coins and they get the service. So what we're doing with the race attack, it's a race condition. Will transaction A or transaction B get confirmed first? And if the attacker does it correct, then they get to spend without spending. All right, so the last one we're going to look at is called a DeFi sandwich. Makes me hungry. So let's have a look at a DeFi sandwich. It's a type of exploit that's used in decentralized finance or DeFi platforms, like, for instance, decentralized exchanges, often called DEXs, and it manipulates a price of a token. And what the attacker essentially does is they place their trades around a large pending transaction from the victim. So what they do is they do something that we've been talking about in the other attacks. They're going to exploit the delay and order the execution mechanisms with the exchange. So we have the delay, we have ordering mechanisms, and that is what we're going to exploit. So let's start with number 1. So we see in here number 1, they're searching for the transaction. So this is called the mempool. It's a pool of unconfirmed transactions. So they're going to monitor that mempool. They're going to find a large pending transaction that centers on a specific token. And that large transaction is actually likely to impact the token's price once it is executed. So we're going to monitor that. And then the next phase here, number 2, is we're going to place a front run buy order. So we quickly place a buy order for the same token just before the victim's transaction is processed. And so when we do this, you see this right here, this is called front running. And it increases the token's price by the time the victim's transaction is executed. So that's number 2. So number 3 over here, their transaction is executed at a higher price. So as a result of that front running, the price of the token has already increased by the time their transaction is processed, this victim's transaction. So they end up buying the token at its inflated price or selling it at a lower price than they intended, depending on the nature of the transaction, because a lot of these can have different outcomes, but this is basically how it works. And then we go to number 4, we place a sell order. So immediately after the transaction is executed, the attacker is going to place a sell order. Why? Well, they want to offload those tokens that they bought during the front run. And this is the second part of the sandwich, where the attacker is going to take advantage of the price Well, how did that price go up? They caused it to go up, right? They had that price change. They caused that price change. And then in the final step, the attacker is going to profit from that. So the attacker will have profit from selling the token at a higher price that was actually artificially inflated by their own initial front run buy order. So what we're doing with a DeFi sandwich is the attacker is artificially inflating the price and then taking the top off and earning from that in that malicious manner. All right, next thing I want to talk about is a little quantum computation. And here's a list of quantum computing attacks. So we start with cryptanalysis, side channel, and move all the way through here. And what I'd like to do is not a deep dive at all, but what I want to do is just talk about very briefly what each one of these attacks is. And so I asked an LLM to throw together a nice picture for me of quantum computing attacks. I think this is pretty cool. I like that. It has quantum computer and it has all the pre-processing nodes, and it looks pretty cool. But let's go ahead and talk about that while I have this snazzy picture on the screen. All right, so the first thing we have for quantum computing is quantum cryptanalysis. So let's have a look at that. So what it does is it's going to leverage the quantum computing power that we have to break traditional encryption, reverse that encryption. This encryption relies on factoring large cryptographic algorithms, large numbers, and then using discrete compute algorithms like that we find in the back end of RSA and ACC. So Shor's algorithm is probably the core of this one that would be able to quickly take these huge prime number factors and quickly crack them. All right, the next one we look at, number 2, a quantum side channel attack. And so what they do is they're going to exploit the physical information leakage from quantum computers like power consumption, electromagnetic emissions, quantum noise. So these quantum side channel attacks want to gather information, infer information about cryptographic keys. The next one we look at is classical to quantum transition attacks. And so this is like almost where we are now, just about attacking targets that are in the process of that transition period where classical cryptographic systems are gradually being replaced and supplemented by quantum resistant cryptography. So they might, an example of this is the fact that a lot of attackers that gain access to encrypted data stores are actually saving the encrypted data stores. They're not doing anything with it. They're just waiting till the time when they can use a quantum computer to crack all that encryption. So that would be a classic to quantum transition attack. The next one we want to look at is number 4, harvest now, decrypt later. That's exactly what I was talking about before, where we are taking advantage of that transition, harvesting encrypted data stores right now until I can take my IBM quantum account and now I have access to 500,000 stable qubits, and then I can start going through and cracking a lot of that encryption. The next one we have is the quantum Trojan horse attack. So what we do is we embed malicious quantum processing algorithms within a legitimate quantum computing task. And so once the task is executed, the malicious quantum algorithm could perform unauthorized operations. So that is embedding an algorithm within that quantum computation. Number 6, quantum supply chain attack. So this is targeting the supply chain of quantum computers, hardware and software. So maybe introducing backdoors or something like that, software updates in the supply chain that might be malicious. Number 7, quantum computer sabotage attacks. So this is when the physically or logically we damage the quantum computer hardware or disrupt its operations. And this could lead to data loss or malfunction, stuff like that, or maybe even one of the worst states that we can have with quantum computers, which is decoherence. All right, the next one we have is number 8, fault injection attack on quantum hardware. So we deliberately introduce errors into that quantum computing hardware. And what we're trying to do is alter the state of the qubits, disrupt quantum gates, maybe even causing incorrect outcomes to quantum algorithms. And then we go to number 9. Number 9 is a quantum DOS. That sounds cool, actually, quantum DOS. So it's a denial of service attack. What we're trying to do is overwhelm and disrupt the quantum computer's resources, making it so that you can't get to the quantum computer resources for normal users. Number 10 is quantum data eavesdropping. And so what you're going to try to do in this case, a little bit difficult, but we're going to intercept and decode quantum communications, specifically stuff like QKD, which is quantum key distribution, those types of channels. And so it might involve exploiting weaknesses in quantum communication protocols or using quantum techniques to intercept and decipher transmitted qubits. But like I said, with decoherence and state collapse and so on, there are many different ways where that wouldn't work, but hey, it's a possibility. Number 11, quantum bit flipping. So this is going to be altering the state of qubits or their operation, changing their value. And this might compromise data integrity. The next one is number 12, quantum error correction mechanism exploitation. One of the most important parts of quantum computing is to make sure that we have error correction, because the environment in which most qubits exist has to be highly isolated to make sure that we don't decohere in that quantum computer. And so if you can corrupt that, then you might disrupt quantum computation and produce a huge number of errors. So what we want to do is exploit maybe flaws in the quantum error correction mechanisms, algorithms, and get more errors out of that quantum computer. And the last one here is a quantum replay attack. It involves capturing a quantum transaction or communication, and we are going to replay it to deceive a system into accepting it as authentic. So when you look at these 13 quantum attacks, I would say that the vast majority of them are unproven. The reason why is because we're still in the infancy, not even to the toddler area of quantum computing. But we can imagine, based upon the technologies that we currently have, that these types of attacks can take place. Next thing we look at then is some of the tools that you can use for crypto analysis. And so we have this one here. It's called CryptTool, and it's an e-learning program in actuality. And what it does is helps you learn crypto analysis. And then we have things like RSA, CTF tool, and CryptTool, and MTP, and many others. There is a tool I've used before called CroccoCrypt. And what you do with it is you right-click on a folder, and then you'll have a CroccoCrypt submenu, and then you can choose your encryption algorithm and pre-shared key and stuff like that, and encrypt files and folders on your device. And there are many, many other tools. Objective number 4, we're going to be looking at some cryptography countermeasures. So how do you defend against cryptographic attacks? There are a lot of potential countermeasures. And in this case, it's not ubiquitous encryption, right? Because we're talking about attacking encryption. But a lot of it is defending your secrets. So that's this right here, cryptographic keys. So access to cryptographic keys should be given to the application or user directly. And then you want to defend those secrets. So IDSs, encrypting those keys, making sure that the key is not in the binary. So you have a cryptographic key, look in the binary, and oh man, the key's included right there. So I can use a tool like bintext or something like that to extract the key. That's crazy. You don't want to do that. Also, for certificate signing transfer of private keys should not be allowed. So when you set up these systems, and for symmetric algorithms, key sizes of 256 bits should be preferred, especially for larger transactions. So in general, one of the important tasks to do is to make sure those key sizes, those bit sizes, are as large as possible. Also, going back to what we're talking about with quantum computers, the larger that bit size, the larger the phase space is that is required for quantum analysis. And so if you want quantum resistance, go big with those key sizes, those bit sizes. Then we want to use decentralized identifiers. We, especially in the cloud, we use a lot of these ZKPs, zero knowledge proofs, to verify transactions. Also in the cloud, we use a lot of HSMs for cryptographic keys to help with those hardware security modules, multiple signature wallets, atomic swaps, out-of-band verification. So you'll find that in transactions that a lot of these are available. The place I've seen this the most is in cloud computation, because you have the ability for third parties to sometimes see what's going on, and just to protect those transactions for third parties, we use those. Multiple confirmations, use a set of trusted bootstrapping nodes to help new nodes that are connected to the network. So when they connect, we have trusted nodes. That way we know exactly where those transactions are coming from. And so we also want to increase the speed at which transactions propagate. Hey, what does that tell us? Those are from our blockchain networks, because you can take advantage of those latencies before propagation. Use batch processing and fair sequencing to prevent transaction reordering and manipulation. So again, that would also apply to the blockchain. To defend against quantum computing attacks, larger keys. Again, like I was saying, making sure that key space is as large as it can be. Oh, also quantum resistant digital signatures. And so, like I said, you can make use of some of that right now. In fact, a very good place to start, which I mentioned before, is the Wikipedia article on quantum resistant computing. Breaking the data into fragments and distributed across multiple locations so that we don't get a reconstruction of the original data. So you'd have to go to all the locations to get it. Quantum specific firewalls. So want to develop them. Notice it doesn't say use quantum specific firewalls. It says to develop them. So what we could do is look at the quantum algorithms, transactions, etc., that are going on, and filter out specific types of attacks that we've already talked about from our communications channel. So this is going to have to be a dev project to make that happen. We don't have a lot of that. You can't go to the Windows firewall and do some type of quantum filter, right? You can't do that yet. Quantum resistance ZKPs, yeah, we can do those. Implement quantum resistance distributed ledger technology. Oh, about that. So there are some abandoned wallets. If you look at Bitcoin and on that ledger, there are sometimes abandoned wallets. So maybe somebody bought 5 Bitcoins back at the very beginning, and then they just kind of forgot about it, and it's been abandoned. Because the wallet is abandoned, the cryptographic algorithms that defend that wallet are out of date. And those especially can be analyzed by quantum computers. But overall, public blockchains do a very good job of using algorithms that are fairly quantum resistant. So that's something we want to focus on, because if I can use quantum computers to hack distributed ledgers, oh, that's a lot of finance, a lot of problems that can cause. TPMs help support this. We use quantum resistant checks in SDLC and code review. These are just part of the code review process. HSMs to strengthen that security. All right, so the last slide that we need to talk about, I mentioned back when we were in, I think we were in the wireless module, and oh no, actually we go back to one of the previous modules where we talked about adding salt to a hash, and that was in module 6, I remember now. And I said that the last slide of the course would talk about key stretching, and here it is. And so what we can do is use key stretching, and it's a generalized concept. The PBKDF2, if you look up these PKCSs, there are several of them, about 20-ish PKCSs. If you look on Wikipedia and look them up, they're what make up a PKI, the components of the PKI. Actually, most of them in the list are deprecated, but either way, the PBKDF2, password-based key derivation function 2, is part of one of these PKCSs, number 5, version 201, and it applies some function like a hash or HMAC to the password or passphrase, along with salt to produce a derived key. So this is just one of the better ways of key stretching. But we also have bcrypt used with passwords, and it does a derivation of the blowfish algorithm, and it's converted to a hashing algorithm to add salt to a password. So if you want to do some password salting, some key stretching, you can use bcrypt. So a couple of different tools that you can use to make your passwords more resistant to cryptographic analysis. In this module, we discussed many different aspects of cryptography, from symmetric to asymmetric algorithms. We also looked at even quantum encryption and many other tools and techniques for cryptanalysis. So there's a lot in here. I took you into a little bit of a shallow dive into some of the algorithms and that specifically apply mathematically for cryptanalysis. And we looked at some of the tools that we can use to help us crack encryption and some that can be used for encryption itself. So there's a lot to think about when you're dealing with cryptography and encryption. In fact, it's an entire field. It's pretty amazing how this came about and where it's going in the future, especially as quantum computers begin to put a wrench into the mechanics of cryptography. So this is the last module. And before we go, I want you to be able to contact me. And so because of that, I have some social media resources that I want to give to you so that you can get in touch with me. The first one over here on this side is my relatively new account on X. I have the logo there and everything. Yeah, I know it used to be called Twitter. Some people still call it Twitter. If you want to find me, it is Black White Hat, but it's BLAK, White Hat. So look me up. And when you see this slide, go to X. If you have to create an account, do it. And then just type in, I finished CEH V13. Will you do that? So hook up right there, check it out, and maybe we can communicate. The next one is if you're on LinkedIn, it's Turnaround Nutrition LLC. I know it's nothing to do with hacking, but yeah, have a look at that. Drop me a note there. You can also drop me or join my network on LinkedIn. Drop in there. And lastly, I have a Discord server with hundreds of my students on it. And this is none of these are CEH official EC Council resources. None of them are. These are my resources. So this server, Discord server, is my Discord server. None of it officially reflects anything having to do with EC Council. So, don't get your lawyers on them, or me. The next thing we look at is this. This is the big thing here. This is a link that will get you into my Discord server. And when you do, please type in, I finished CEH V13, right? And then I can welcome you to the Discord community. So basically the Discord community is for people to talk about everything from exams to courseware to content to questions about other things. You can even post things that you're starting a consulting business or whatever. So all of that is Discord. Over here is more like small snippets of information, following the news, hacking news. And then LinkedIn is kind of like the more general, all-around, all-purpose site. So these are ways to contact me. Remember, just type in that you finished CEHV13. So I know that that's the reason why you dropped into one of these resources. And before we go, I want to wish you the best studies. I want you to be a certified ethical hacker. I want you to be a pen tester, whatever your career aspirations are. The job world is full of opportunity. The business world is full of opportunity. And I hope to talk to you about it a little bit on one of these social media forums. And best of luck to you.